Well, hello again. We're here for another one of our Meet the Manager interviews. We are delighted to be here today with Ian McLennan from Triple Point. Ian, do you want to say hello and introduce yourself?
Yeah, hi guys, hi Mark. So I'm Ian McLennan. I'm a partner at Triple Point Investment Management, and my day job is to manage the venture investing team there. So our venture VCT and our impact EIS, running a team of 5 of us. I've been at Triple Point for over 12 years now, and all of that time pretty much involved in EIS and VCT funds. And before that, I was involved in institutional investment management and research in various guises.
Fantastic. So part of the furniture at Triple Point, by the sound of it.
I'm afraid so, yeah.
Nothing to be afraid about, nothing to be afraid about. So yeah, I guess in terms of, it's a good starting point in that sense, because whilst you're part of the furniture at Triple Point have been there 12 years, I guess impact investing and ESG investing, or certainly in terms of the fund, is a bit more of a new proposition for Triple Point. So do you want to give us kind of a quick overview as to what you mean by impact investing? Because the fund is called an impact fund, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's right. It's the impact EIS service. So I think maybe people watching will be increasingly familiar with ESG investing, the environment, social governance issues, and obviously that's been a growing theme for a couple of decades actually, but I think particularly in the last sort of 5 years, as the themes of climate change and inequality have had a lot more general airtime, and there are a lot of listed funds that focus on ESG for equities or bonds or whatever. But impact investing is taking it a step further. It's something that a lot of institutional investors like pension funds, but also family offices are increasingly interested in, which is having investments which, yes, provide a good financial return in line with whatever the mandate is, but also make a positive social contribution. So that's a step further than just screening out companies which maybe don't comply with one's environmental, social, and governance criteria. And just one other thing on that, Mark, is we launched specifically Impact EIS 3 years ago. I think as we saw on you had held a forum, EISA held a forum a month and a half ago on ESG and impact investing in EIS. And of course, as well as ourselves, there are a number of other managers who have a sustainability theme or an ESG theme or whatever. But our key issue is we want to see a positive social impact from the company's product or service, as well as a good growth story.
Okay, so yeah, thank you for mentioning the webinar, by the way. But yeah, some of the things we picked up on that webinar that we'll perhaps pick up in the course of the next 20 minutes or so. One of them being, when I was an IFA, when I was a financial planner all those years ago, there was kind of green investments came along, ethical investments as they were called, and I guess it's just kind of the next evolution of that from kind of 10, 15 years ago. Does that mean then that this is a new territory? What I'm trying to say is this isn't a fad, this is a growing trend, this is a growing movement towards those type of business you mentioned a minute ago in terms of having an impact. So these are mission-led businesses. These are companies.
Yeah, I think we have to accept that to some extent, some things do go in and out of fashion, but longer term there is a momentum behind this. So it started off with socially responsible investing. It's morphed really these days into ESG, which we touched on, and then really for the last decades, family office and so on have been interested in impact investing, and we are seeing it not just actually in our impact EIS at Triple Point, but also we have quite a big investment portfolio in social housing at Triple Point. Currently, that's in a fund that's in a REIT listed on the London Stock Exchange, but increasingly we're seeing that institutional investors are interested potentially in direct investment into the kind of social housing asset class. So I think there's a lot of momentum behind this, and it will be a growing theme going forward. It's not just a fad, and increasingly it is accepted that good governance, good sustainability policies, treating your staff properly, these are also the keys to good investment. If you don't do these things well, the business probably isn't going to get too far in today's climate. And you really need to be addressing those things to have a good, to make a good investment. And we're just going a step further than that and saying we also want the companies to have a product which is helping people or helping society or helping the environment as well.
Yeah, so these are companies that are putting those things in terms of trying to help the environment or a particular part of society over and above profit. Is that correct?
That's correct. We still like profit.
I was going to say, that's what I was trying to lead into. So how do you choose a company when the company comes to you and says, look, we think we hit your criteria? I guess what I'm asking is, what are your metrics and what are your kind of benchmarks and KPIs for investing in a company?
Yeah, there's a lot there. Maybe I'll start with how we choose them on the impact basis, and then you can remind me to come back to the profit basis, which is also key. But so with the impact EIS, the way we started doing this is we looked at, as a number of investors have, the United Nations Sustainable Development Goals, of which they have 17, and there are things like everyone's got a right to potentially to good quality education, gender equality, fair wages, etc. And we looking at that, we decided we could address the majority of their Sustainable Development Goals by focusing on 4 sectors in terms of the investment of the EIS fund. So I mean, and some of it's pretty obvious, but just to go through it briefly, healthcare is one theme or sector. Children and young people, which would encompass education and training. The environment is a pretty obvious one. And then slightly less obviously is inequality or reducing inequality. And it's pretty obvious how investing in healthcare related companies can potentially have a positive social impact. But when we're looking at reducing inequality, we're not necessarily thinking just of income inequality, but it could be inequality of access to something like fair prices of energy, or one that springs to mind is kind of access to technology. So one of our investee companies, a company called We Are Digital, helps to train. Well, it trains people to better understand and work with technology. So you've got a whole bunch of banks who want to get their customers online. Not all of those customers are happy with apps and online banking. They will pay for our investee company, We Are Digital, to train perhaps older people or people who are less used to the internet to get online. That's one example. Gotcha.
Okay, so just going back to your point about the profit, I want to pick that up again. So We Are Digital, you look a great company, sound a great company, doing great things in equality. I'm an investor. Yeah. Sounds great, but obviously I put my mythical £10,000 into the fund. I want to see £20,000 back or £15,000 back in a few years' time. How do you kind of marry up or align the two objectives there?
Yeah, absolutely. So just to be crystal clear, we're not talking about any sort of philanthropic activity here. We do want the financial returns for our investors, as well as the positive social impact, and of course the EIS tax benefits, crucially. The great thing about these sectors that I've mentioned, or themes that we're addressing, is they open up some big potential marketplaces, and that's one thing that we're looking for in the investments. Is we want our companies to have a very large addressable market to sell their product into if and when it proves successful. A second thing is we do have a preference for companies that are what I would call capital light. So they have a tendency to be more software focused, or they own some other form of intellectual property, or they're brand focused, rather than more capital intensive businesses. And we do that because just we're in a better position to help the more capital light businesses, and they're more likely to be able to grow quickly, scale their business quickly, scale their impact as well quickly if they're capital light, and get a better return on equity for our investors. And I guess there's a whole bunch of things, but the other thing one has to mention in investing in venture capital, and how do you find the good ones, is obviously it's about the founders as well, and many of them are very excited about their kind of impact mission, but we also want them to be to be people that we believe can also produce that good financial return. So driven, experienced in their sector, all the things you'd expect us to be looking for.
Yeah. And for advisors or anyone kind of looking to invest in this area or that hasn't done so before and is kind of a bit nervous, dipping their toe in the water kind of stuff, what kind of messages would you say to them about kind of getting into impact investing and ESG investing?
Yeah, well, I mean, I think that they will find that a lot of their clients are interested in it, especially if they start talking to them about it more, get a bit more comfortable talking about it and see whether the client wants it. And they will find there is a lot of evidence to present. There have been a lot of studies that show that whether it's ESG investing or it's the next step, the impact investing that we're talking about, that the evidence suggests that it does not damage financial returns for investors. If anything, quite the opposite. So it does look as though to an extent investors can have their cake and eat it here in terms of getting the returns that they're hoping for or looking for, and also feeling better about their investments. Yeah.
Yeah, and I guess that's, as you said earlier, that's a growing trend amongst investors. They are looking for this type of investment as well as obviously getting that return. They want to have their money make a social impact or make an impact on society and create a better world. And obviously, I guess with COVID, kind of feeding COVID in, because we have to talk about COVID in every single webinar these days. I think it's the law.
Right.
With COVID,
I was trying not to.
Sorry, yeah, I crowbarred it in there. But in terms of COVID, and obviously, hopefully, touch wood, moving out of COVID, does that change the dynamics of the companies that you're seeing? Are you seeing different companies to were a year ago? Has that kind of moved the dial at all?
Yeah, good question. There was only out of the dozen or so we have in the portfolio already, there was only one that was directly impacted by COVID. That's a company that's selling software around nutrition, etc., into the hospitality sector. So you can imagine they've had a tough time. But the rest of them, after initial kind of hiccup in kind of March, April last year, things have pretty much rolled on as planned. So, so in terms of the portfolio, not a huge effect. In terms of the opportunities, I mean, clearly, I think the opportunities are similar, but clearly, particularly in areas like healthcare, we've seen perhaps faster adoption of digital technologies since COVID. I mean, at one point I was kind of wondering, is this going to slow up adoption of digital health because people are just too busy dealing with the crisis? But it does seem to have increased the pace at which the National Health Service in particular is willing to experiment with some software-based either processes or screening methods which can help them. So, for example, one company that we've invested in, which is a fairly simple story, although maybe not a simple technology, but a simple story, is Skin Analytics, which has software which can screen a skin lesion and tell with 95% accuracy whether it is cancerous or not. So deploying technology like that as a screening tool before using up the expert dermatologist's time can save the NHS hundreds of millions, but could also get the waiting lists down much more quickly and can get people treated much more quickly and hopefully save them from extra distress. So that is one area where we've seen faster adoption actually as a result of COVID.
Sure. And a company like that you mentioned there, obviously you give the money company, you give the company money, that's pretty obvious. But what role do you play as a fund manager? How are you holding the hand of that company? Yeah,
so there are some sectors where Triple Point has more to add, and some sectors where we have less to add. I mean, the areas, and that's one of the criteria we actually use, Mark, when we're screening companies, is what can we help this business or not? And some of the sectors where we think we can help them include the NHS, include fintech, include social housing. And so with that company, we did use one of our advisors to introduce them to a variety of different contacts at the National Health Service. So in that case, we were able to be directly helpful, but it will vary with different sectors.
Sure. Sure. With obviously tax year end, we're just to date stamp the video, we're 26th of February today, but with tax year end kind of hoving into view now, and advisors starting to look at very seriously what their EIS portfolios might be for clients. The type of companies you're working with at the moment, type of companies that might be in the portfolio, how much of an idea will an investor get about what type of companies or what exact companies will be in their portfolio?
Yeah, well, they will be in these 4 themes that I talked about, that's for sure. They will get a mix of new investments that maybe I don't know about yet, some investments that we've already got in the pipeline, and some follow-on investments. And I can mention, I could mention briefly a couple of companies which are in the portfolio which have follow-on rounds coming up. So they potentially would be in new investors' portfolios. I mean, and also to go back to one of your earlier questions about how would advisors talk to investors about this? I mean, I think these are a couple of exciting companies to talk to investors about. So one of them is a company called Nature Metrics, which has a female founder and a female chief executive, incredibly dynamic team. And they are a science-based business that promotes biodiversity, which is kind of making sure that we don't accidentally make more species extinct or on the verge of extinction. And they do that using their laboratory, which can test for environmental DNA. And you might say, well, that's all very nice, Ian, but how's that actually making me money? And I mean, the key here is that they are solving a big challenge for some customers. So companies and governments are increasing pressure to measure and report on their impact on biodiversity and the environment, whether it's by regulation or it's by their own customers, or increasingly by investors who are looking at these ESG screens, etc., that we talked about. Their customers would already include HS2, Anglo American, a number of the big engineering consultancies who will get Nature Metrics to do their environmental DNA sampling on soil or water samples. And this is just a much more efficient, systematic process than sending people out into the field to lay traps for animals or look at them under microscopes and so on. And the data collection and management is much more efficient. So that's a company that's growing very well. I think there'll be another fundraising soon. And then the other one that I would mention is a software business, Cyan Forensics. They are a spin out from Edinburgh's Napier University, and their software is used, Mark, right now to help police forces and counter-terrorism screen suspects' devices like laptops or PCs for illegal images. I mean, in particular, this is around exploitation of children. And that software is already being rolled out to all the police forces in the UK. But the really exciting, and hopefully the social impact there is obvious, but the really exciting commercial thing there is that this software can also help the social media companies with online safety. So they're under increasing pressure as well, not to let harmful content stay on their websites or even get on their websites. And this software can be part of the process for screening for known illegal images without humans having to do that, which is literally the way it's done at the moment, which is not only expensive, but can be fairly traumatic for the people involved. So Nature Metrics, Cyan Forensics, those are a couple of examples of sort of companies that we like, that we're already invested in, and will be, for investors that invest in the relatively near term, might form part of their portfolios.
Okay, well, thanks. That's a great insight into those two companies, because immediately, without even knowing how they make revenue or they're going to come to profit, you feel like they're companies you want to invest into. We all obviously want to start.
I hope so.
Those kind of images on computers. Yeah, I'm reading a book about biodiversity at the moment, and the fact that we only know about, I think we only know about 1 or 2% of the whole species that have ever been on the Earth. So we don't know about 98, 99% of all the species that have been on the Earth. And most of the early kind of professors and doctors who looked at species, rather than look after them, just killed them.
Great.
Didn't keep any
Mark,
kind of records.
Mark, I'll put you down for some nature metrics.
Please do. That'd be good to see. Yeah. Look, we fired through kind of 15, 20 minutes already. It's hard to believe.
Yeah.
But, thank you very much for offering your insights and thoughts there. Just as the last 30 seconds, just want to give 30 seconds about kind of what happens next. How can we get in contact with you if people want to follow up?
Yeah, I think, have a look on the Triple Point website. You'll see all sorts of documentation there about, you'll see our sales briefing and information memorandum on the Impact EIS, or drop me an email, or drop you an email and you can forward it to me, Mark.
Even better, yeah. If you're watching this and you've been on our website, you'll see a link to
and obviously, I hope a lot of the people watching will already have a regular Triple Point contact and may have bought one of our other various products in the past. So to just get in touch with your Triple Point contact, please.
Unless it's Jack Rose, people don't bother with him.
Yeah.
If anyone knows Jack,
we mustn't be cruel to Jack.
We shouldn't be. Well, thank you very much, Ian. It's been great talking to you. Thank you, and take care.
No worries. Thanks, Jack. I mean, Mark.